Men of Valor, welcome back to episode 4 of season 2 of our MOV podcast. I am Jordan Loggins. If you're watching here on YouTube, you can obviously see that. I am joined today by my brother from Arkansas, Mr. Randal Ballew. Randal, it's bright and early. How you doing out there?
Yeah, just so you guys know, I'm still here. It's been a while. Man, life has been busy. Just joking earlier, man. Just things have been kind of crazy, been all over the place, and hadn't been able to
Yeah.
get on. And I'm just gonna warn you, man. It's been a crazy morning already. Jordan and I, we're recording this at like 5, 6 a.m. And so if my dog or my wife disrupt this podcast, I just want to apologize on the front end because my bride, as beautiful as she is, does not know how to act right when Randall's trying to do serious things. So just a warning.
Yeah, one day we're gonna have to do these as like the raw, uncut versions of these podcasts, so guys can see some of the hilarious stuff that happens before we actually get started. We start giving the warnings of, "Hey, stop! I'm actually recording now." Uh,
Yeah.
but it's
Or
it's been a
hey,
pretty entertaining start.
yeah, go to another address for a little while, Lauren. Like, go to the neighbor's house. No, she loves, man. She loves getting me, and she can. I'm gonna tell you, there's one person, man, that can just kind of get me when I'm trying to be serious. I'll tell you this. A few years ago, this is years ago. I was preaching one of my first sermons, and one of my first sermons while we were married. And I get up on the stage, and I always walk, so I walk to the side, and she looks up at me and she's like, "Hey," and I'm like, What is that?" And I realize it's the motion for your flies unzipped, dude. When I tell you my soul left my body, oh my gosh. I walked back over to the pulpit and I kind of did the real quick, like, slide
Zip.
check. It was zipped up. And she was
Oh
dying
no!
laughing, dying laughing. And I'm just drenched in sweat at that point. Don't even know what I'm preaching on. And
I'm sure
yeah,
you're
so
ready to
that's
come off that stage for multiple reasons right then.
that's what I have to deal with. It was zipped up. It was,
I guess I've been
yeah.
doing this marriage thing a little bit longer than you. It's a few more years because my office door back behind me here is locked. Because I know that not just my bride, my 14-year-old child would be peeking in, like, "Hey, what's Dad doing?
Yeah.
Can we disrupt him?"
Yeah.
And they'd be popping up like right there in the background. That's why I keep the blurred background too, just in case. You
Well,
never know what they're going to do popping in on me.
I feel like I pick a different podcast location every time we do this. It's kind of like location roulette around here. Before you know it, I'm going to be in the bathtub, fully clothed, but I'll probably be in the bathtub doing a podcast because I'm running out of spaces where I can get away from my obnoxious, annoying, and loud family.
Well, at least you're not in the little girls' room that had the sweet plants and stuff behind it, like you were. Was it a month and a half ago? Right before we started
Why,
posting on YouTube, that would have been a good one.
why's it got to be like that, Jordan?
It's got to be like that.
You making fun of my plants? Men can't have plants, Jordan.
You know what? You're the one that called it out on yourself. I didn't even
Well,
have
we
to.
did. I called it out because I thought, how organized I am. I thought we were recording the video for that one, and so I wanted to get
Yeah,
ahead of the curve. You know how it is.
you were a week or
You
two
kind of,
early on that one.
yeah. Well, I'm a week or two early or a week or two late on just about everything. So,
If you guys cannot tell, it is 5 a.m. Randall's time. It is 6 a.m. my time, and both of us are running on very little sleep. It has been an interesting week to say the least for both of us. Um, Hectic, good and bad. Lots of stuff happening. Prayers appreciated this way. I'm not going to go into details and stuff, but a lot going on with my family, some family sickness and stuff. But God's good, and we're still seeing His faithfulness in all these situations. And Randall and I can still hop on these podcasts and cut up and have a good time because we know at the end of the day, God's in control. I'm super excited
absolutely.
about this topic. We've got the expert on this topic here with me. Mr. Randall is going to be our expert. I'm just going to interview him, and he is going to give us all the amazing advice that his youth leadership mind has gained over the years. I'm just expecting the wisdom to come pouring out. I'm excited to see what kind of stuff he shares. And then when he gets done talking, I'll give you the real information and we'll go from there. Uh, so without anything else, Randall? I think we're ready to jump right into this. So, brother, let's get after it.
This is the Men of Valor podcast. We exist to help men grow as disciples of Jesus.
Welcome to Season 2. We're glad you're here.
Let me tell you, I once was a sinner, but I am no longer a sinner. I am a saint. I am a son of the living God Most High.
Go home, embrace your wife with no expectations, and tell her that you love her. And ask her, how can I lead you? Tell me what you need. Be transparent, be open, be honest.
But if we arm ourselves and we never use what we have, that's useless.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. Here are your hosts, Travis Watson, Eric Stewart, Jordan Loggins, and Randall Ballew. Let's get after it.
All right, guys, it is time to dive into this topic. We are continuing the conversation today on relationships. Most of our conversations so far have been centered around marriage, and then last week they were talking about divorce. So we're going to kind of dial it way back this week, and we are going to talk about dating. And I can't think of a better person to have on here than the youth pastor, who is constantly working with teenagers and is used to having these kind of conversations and trying to feed into students what it means to date and to do so from a godly standpoint. So, Randall, I'm going to open it up with one quick question. If you could give one piece of advice to a student and then really hear it, what would you tell your students in regards to dating?
Man, that's a tough one, and the reason it's tough, and I'm not trying to escape the answer here, but the reason it's tough is because I learned a long time ago that we have to stop approaching dating as an individual topic and a universal answer. The real answer to this question, to dive deeper, is going to be specific to each individual person. We can't just give a single answer for everybody. And I think that's, an easy way to say, I can't answer that question. Now, that being said, if there was one piece of advice in regards to dating, first off, look at my life and do the exact opposite. I think in all seriousness, quit. If I was going to tell a teenager, even my own son, quit pursuing a person and pursue God and let him provide a person. I think we get so wrapped up, especially in our younger years and teenagers, they begin to pursue a person and they leave God out of it, which is things that I have done. I did for years. Until you finally get to a point like I did where it was like, hey, throwing up my hands, I'm done with this. God, if you have somebody, you're going to place them in my life, you're going to provide them. And if we miss that initial step in this dating process, we're kind of destined for failure, and we're destined for heartbreak, because people are going to let us down. And I think, to give you maybe a second part of that answer, is don't give someone control of your emotions so quickly.
Absolutely.
We definitely want to build trust and build a relationship with others, because that's what we're called to do. We're communal people. But for the young 14, 15, however old girl, the 12, 14, 15, 16, 18 guy, keep your emotions close. Don't give someone access to those things so quickly, because, again, as sinful people with a sinful nature, selfishness abounds, and we give it away too fast. And I'm not even talking about the physical side of things. I'm talking about the emotional side of things. man, we give people the keys to our emotional mindset so quickly. And then if they can get your emotional mindset thrown off, you're done. Even at a young age. And it takes a lot of time to recover. Teenagers experience real feelings, man, real raw emotion. So yeah, I think those two things, Jordan, don't give somebody the keys to your emotional, well-being so quickly. And then also quit pursuing an individual person and pursue God and let him provide that person.
Yeah, I've watched those emotional sides already play out in my house. I've got a 14-year-old girl crazy boy here at my house, and he's had his first girlfriends at like 11. Obviously he's not doing any kind of dating whatsoever, but they're texting and they're on the phone, and we'll walk in his room and he'll be like playing video games and she's on video chat. They're having a conversation while he's playing video games, and he's already gone through some of that hurt. He gets all emotionally involved, and the I love you start after like 3.5 minutes, because that's what they do at that age. And but I've actually seen him get emotionally invested, and he's gotten hurt, and I hate to see that. I look back at my own life. Boy, if I could go back and tell 14-year-old, 15, 16-year-old me some stuff, that would have been really, really good advice. Would have saved a lot of heartache, would have saved a lot of stupid decision making at that age. And when it comes to letting God provide, my wife, I hope she doesn't listen to this episode. She might kill me. I met Jessica when I was 16, getting ready to turn 17 at church. Wasn't looking for a girlfriend because I had a girlfriend. And then in stumbles this 5'4" brunette at church who my buddy was actually wanting to pursue. I had no idea it was a girl he was interested in. But it was Jessica. And I met her that night, and I knew that was the girl that I wanted to date. Fast forward, I was 16 then, so fast forward 5 years and we were married. I wasn't looking for anything at that. God put her in my path, and I know to this day God put her in my path. Now, me already having a girlfriend wasn't the ideal scenario. That's not something I'd recommend to guys. I don't recommend that at all. But the girl that I was dating just to date. I wasn't dating for any other purpose other than I felt like I had to have a girlfriend at all times. And I know God put Jessica in front of me that day. I know that was meant to happen. I just started going to Liberty at that point, and she came with a friend. And so that piece of advice rings very true in my life, brother. So in the dating world, when you've got these teenagers, what do you think is the biggest flaw in their approach to dating? What do you think is the biggest struggle that you're seeing? I mean, I know you kind of touched on the advice a little bit, but I know you're probably seeing the drama unfold in your youth group. You're probably having little girls that are having their hearts broke. You have guys that are just running around doing this and that and the other. What's the biggest flaw in their approach that you're seeing?
Yeah, man, I'm gonna say it's kind of weird, but fortunately, right now, our youth group is very unique. We're growing like crazy. But man, when we get there on a Wednesday night or Sunday morning, our guys go this way and our girls go this way. There's only a few. Yeah, there's only a few that actually speak to each other. And it's nice because that relieves a lot of pressure. Now, that being said, it's not always been like that. You get a girl who's guy crazy, a guy who's girl crazy. And I think, navigating those waters as a youth minister is difficult because I can only give them, advice, and I can only give them, suggestion. I technically in that area can't offer instruction or discipline. It would be nice to be able to look at a guy and be like, hey, you moron, leave her alone. Or look at a girl and be like, hey, leave that dude alone, or yeah, y'all quit. Don't cross that line. I can't do that. That's the parent's role. I can offer advice and I can offer suggestion and I can say, hey, honor God with what you do. But I think the biggest misconception with dating in teens is they just cannot function without somebody. It's funny too, because we're seeing more and more teenagers develop an introvert mindset, right? They want to be alone. They want to do things themselves. but that emotional just desire for connection. And unfortunately, because of, the way that the brain is wired, that is found in, the dating world.
Yeah.
Now here's where it gets really crazy and where my heart just really, really breaks is, you have, a young boy or a young girl, and, just for lack of better terms, may not have hit puberty or gone through the changes, and they're in that awkward phase. They may not be the most attractive kid, or they may not be the most popular kid, and they can't get that emotional connection at home because mom and dad have checked out, or mom and dad don't care. And so they look for the opposite sex. Well,
Yep.
what happens if the opposite sex isn't interested? Then they start looking at the same sex, and my heart breaks for them. And obviously, as a Christian, I have values and beliefs that I stand on regarding marriage and relationships. But man, how heartbreaking it is that a young girl or a young boy can't fulfill that emotional connection at home. So he looks to the opposite sex to fulfill that, and it can't be fulfilled there either. So now he looks, or she looks, to another route. And so what happens is there's this void, and the biggest misconception and the biggest flaw is that they think they have to fill that void with another person.
Mm-hmm.
They have that emotion. They have that emotional void, and they think they have to fill it with another human. And it's very difficult to explain to teenagers that, hey, God can fill that void, because in the mind of a teenager, God is this mystical figure in the air. He's not physically there. And so dating from the jump is flawed in this younger generation, because they have a misconception of God being fully present. And so that emotional void is filled with whatever's next down the list. Fortunately, some people are able to fill that void with God when they truly have that desire and that relationship with him. But man, I'm going to tell you, and maybe I'm wrong here, I don't care how close you are to God. If you are attracted to somebody, man, it's difficult, because even as a teenager, if you say, well, yeah, I'm not dating, but then that guy or that girl comes in the room, and you're a 14-year-old guy or girl, and they walk in, and you forget about God for a minute, right? Because you have that desire, that emotional void, and you think to yourself, man, can that person fulfill that? And so it's heartbreaking. And listen, I don't want to say, I don't want to get at parents and be like, hey, dads, it's your fault that your kid's out having sex, or it's your fault that your kid is searching for love. I'm not trying to throw shade at parents. Is there areas where they can definitely improve? Absolutely. But the most important thing is a misconception of who God is, and that he can be physically present and fill that void for those teenagers. And Jordan, I think it goes back to, because all their childhood, we give them this idea of God at being this unapproachable, untouchable person or figure that is just, domineering over us, when in all reality, yes, he is in charge, he is in control, but he's walking step for step before us. Like, we can have access to him. And so I know that's a lot, but I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that desire to have that person. I mean, honestly, I think that is a God-given desire. I mean, when Adam was created, and then his rib was taken and Eve was created to be a part of him, that I think that is a God-designed desire to have that relationship, but doing so in the biblical alignment that God gave us. God first, then the relationship second. And I think way too many of us get that wrong. And it's especially true in teenagers, but I think even in the dating world of being in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s, that's still very, very true. We were dating from a selfish standpoint of what can that person bring me, and not how can this complete God's plan for my life. And we fail to recognize that. And I think it's even further complicated. I don't know if this is an issue in Arkansas, but it's definitely one in Georgia. These teenagers in these early 20s, mid 20s, they don't know how to communicate. I think in a world of this generation being raised up on cell phones, I mean, we went to lunch with a group of friends, and there was a little girl that my son at that point in time had interest in. They're sitting across the table from each other, texting. They're not speaking and have a conversation. They're texting one another. So they're over there like snickering and laughing, and we're like, "What are y'all talking about?" And they're like, "Oh, we're texting each other." You're literally sitting across the table from each other. Have a conversation, but it's like they've lost that ability. And I thought it was just kind of my son's generation. No, it's extending into the early 20s and the mid 20s right now. And if you don't know how to properly communicate with somebody, how are you ever going to figure out if you're compatible, if you are aligned? And we'll get to the scriptures on this here in a few minutes, but it's a real struggle when you don't have that ability to verbally discuss and communicate what your interests are, what your passions are, what your pursuits are going to be. I can only imagine if you never can properly communicate and end up marrying somebody, and then you're like, we have nothing in common at all, zero, because they never talked about anything. There was no depth of conversation. And the 20s, I know for me and Jessica, that was such a age of growth and personal development. A lot of change took place that if we weren't communicating through those 20s, and if we weren't continuing to date through our 20s, even though we're married, we still had to do the dating thing. We would never made it, because who I was at 30 versus who I was at 20, dramatically different people. So that communication piece is going to be vital to this dating thing. So let's focus on your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. You know, the dating world when you are not the teenager, the lust-filled pursuits of teenage years, that kind of thing. I have to have somebody. So you're talking to an adult, someone who either has never been married, maybe they've had a divorce like they talked about last week, and is looking to have that really God-centered relationship. How does your advice shift when you're having those conversations with somebody?
Man, first of all, you've got to dig down and find what their presuppositions on relationships are. Mm-hmm. Growing up in my household, and Jordan, I'm just going to assume yours is kind of similar, just from what I know. There weren't a lot of rules. There wasn't a lot of things you had to follow. Like, you just kind of had to figure things out.
Absolutely.
You know, I'll just be transparent here, and I don't think this is inappropriate, but you know, the sex talk that I had, Jordan, was at 13 years old. My dad walked in and tossed me a box of condoms and said, "Don't get her pregnant." And that was it.
Mine was pretty close to that.
That was it. And that may sound vulgar to some of you, and I apologize if it does, but that was my talk. Like, that was all I got. My mom wasn't going to have that conversation with me, you know, living back and forth, 2 different households. And so that's what I had. And so my presupposition, my growing up, what I viewed relationships was just all I saw before me. I saw my mom, who loved her to death, had a rough life, 4 different children with 4 different guys, married 3 or 4 different times, never settling down, always somebody different. I remember, you know, different dudes all the time. And again, I'm not disrespecting my mom. I'm just speaking the truth. My dad, you know, had a very unhealthy addiction to, I don't even want to say things on the internet. It's just things in general, just being out in public. And, you know, he's with me and my brothers, and he's been married to my stepmother for years. And then, you know, catcalling and cooing and whatever at women, and commenting on every single woman he saw. And so you have to figure out where you are before you can figure out where you want to go. And so, you know, talking to that 20-year-old, that 30-year-old, 40-year-old that may have gone through a divorce, you have to talk to them and remind them, hey, your last relationship does not have to define your next one. Mm-hmm. And what you have seen and witnessed does not have to be the standard for what's next. This is, I don't think my mother-in-law would mind me sharing this. She is a saint. She's one of the best people I know. I could do a lot better at being a better son-in-law. And that's just a shameless conviction on my part. A lot of people who know my mother-in-law and know my father-in-law would not expect that both of them have been divorced. You don't think about it. My mother-in-law had a rough go. Her first husband, Lauren's dad, they just had a rough go, and praise God, man. Her dad is doing so good right now, and just really proud of, what he's done, and mine and his relationship is better than it ever has been, her relationship with him. But Lauren's mom went through that divorce, then she immediately jumped in another relationship with a very psychotic and abusive person. And who her father threatened to shoot and all kinds of craziness, and then jumped in a relationship with now my father-in-law Dwight, who is just a really, really good dude. And so she had to get rid of the thoughts of, well, my next relationship is going to be just like my last one, and begin to think, okay, how can I start fresh and honor God in here? And I'm not saying that means every single one of us need to just jump ship and start over. That's not true at all. As you can go back and listen, there are biblical grounds for divorce and things like that. But I agree with those guys. We should not be pursuing those grounds. Like, we should not be intentionally looking for ways out.
Absolutely.
And so that 30-year-old that's just gone through a terrible divorce, maybe because of sin on his wife, maybe he made a mistake, whatever. If man to man, I'm going to look him in the eye and I'm going to ask him, it's like, hey, what's your relationship with God like?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, you telling me that you're desiring to get into another relationship, depending on how quick it is. I would highly recommend not to do something very quick. I would take at least a year, maybe longer. But I would tell him, be like, hey, where are you giving God access in this moment? Like, what are you doing that is aligning your will with his? Or are you simply, again, just looking to fill a void? And man, thankful that my mother-in-law found my father-in-law and that they've had a healthy and wonderful marriage for many, many years. But it took a lot of soul searching. It took a lot of her, getting on her knees before God and just asking him, hey, I'm trusting you in this. Like, I need you to guide me through this, instead of us just guiding ourselves. Jordan, I started dating at a very young age. And until I met Lauren, don't have a good track record. Just heartache after heartache after heartache, doing stupid things. And I remember I finally got to the point where I was like, I'm done with this. I was like, I'm done with this. I'm finished. Like, I'm not dating anymore. And then like a few weeks later, I met Lauren, and man, we've been together ever since. We got married less than a year after knowing each other, which is not recommended. Yeah, not recommended. And married 9 months. No, married a year and a half, and then had Caleb. And so, like, our life is weird, man. I've had maybe 9 months of one-on-one time with my wife before everything shifted to being a parent. And dude, the sad thing is I'm still figuring this out. Like, the things I would tell a man who's looking to, to fulfill that relationship as a married man, I'm still looking to figure those things out, man. I'm looking, how can I pursue my wife? And I'll just be honest with you, man, I suck at it. I do. I don't want to toss blame here, but maybe it's because of the presuppositions I had growing up. Maybe it's because of the things that I experienced. Maybe it's because I don't know how to love selflessly, and I'm a very selfish person. And so, yeah, I mean, we've got to do a lot of soul searching, and a lot of just, God, is this what you want from me? Like, is this what you want from me? And it all goes back to the, dying to yourself. And well, I know you said you have some scripture you want to look at, but man, you have to not so much worry about being compatible when it comes to hobbies, likes, and interests, but you have to, I'm telling you, it is going to be so much easier if you are both on the same page when it comes to Jesus.
Yep. And that starts at the beginning of dating. That's one of the things Jessica and I did early on. We did a lot of things wrong. We did a lot of things out of order. But one of the things we both did early on was talk about how important church was to us and Jesus was to us. And that was a conversation we had early. Both of us come from divorced homes. Both of us watched those nasty relationships play out in front of us, and we knew we didn't want that. Have things always been perfect in our marriage? No. There have been a lot of struggles and fights through the valley and those kind of things. But we both went into this knowing divorce wasn't an option. And so we worked through our things, and we both recognized that you can't fill, and I don't know where I heard this, but you can't fill a God-sized hole with anything worldly. And so when you've got the God thing right, then you can start putting the other pieces around it that are meant to be there. And I there's no doubt in my mind that Jessica was the one who God intended to be my bride. I have been far from perfect as a husband. I was far from perfect as a boyfriend at times. We had our fights, we had our struggles, we broke up a couple of times. But at the end of the day, we knew that was a relationship that was destined to be. But again, we communicated through it. We talked through it. We always said we can't quit. We can't allow anything to come in between that. Couple times we got God out of the center of it. We fell out of church briefly a couple of times. Fortunately, we had people in our life that we had given authority to kind of speak into our lives and be accountability partners, those kind of things, and it pulled us back in. The biggest thing for me is, though, even with us having the conversation of we need to keep God centered and we need to be focused on church, that kind of thing, I wasn't even saved. And I didn't get saved until 2017. I got married in 2009. Thought I was. What it ended up being just kind of a head knowledge that I knew who Jesus was in my head, but I never had that relationship. And so even though we're having this conversation of keep Jesus first, keep God first, I didn't even have the relationship in place to do that. So after 2017, I'll tell you, it transformed our marriage just on a whole nother level. When I got my relationship right there first. So I truly, for the first time ever, was biblically aligned the way God called us to be. We had God that had a relationship, and then me, and then Jessica, and then Connor. And that's the way everything flows in our household. Not that I have some sort of dominion over her or anything like that, no authority over her. But it definitely has made 2017 through now a whole lot more fun. There's less valleys, there's less struggles, those kind of things. So getting that right is absolutely important to having the relationship that God wants. But when you're 20 and 30 and 40, knowing the intent of your dating matters too. You shouldn't be out there to find that somebody to go and party with and do these kind of things. Your intent should be finding that mate, that spouse, and not just looking to find somebody to have fun with. But I think that's what a lot of people are out there doing. They want that person for them to party and continue their crazy wild lifestyle and that kind of thing. And we've got too many immature 20, 30, 40-year-olds in this world. We've got too many that are still pursuing selfish, worldly desires. And that's probably why they're continuing to date and not have that connection with someone, because they're not looking for any depth of relationship. I married Jessica knowing who I wanted as a life partner. That's somebody that I wanted to share memories with, that I wanted to, at some point be able to travel the world. We're like you and Lauren. We were only married for a very brief time before Connor came into the world, and we quickly became parents. So we didn't have a lot of that. It would have been nice to have 2 or 3. We say it would have been nice to have 2 or 3 years of being married and kind of figuring things out, but we were broke. So it's not like we could have gone and done anything. So I'll only be 39 years old when my son graduates high school, and hopefully in a little bit better financial state to go and travel the world and do and experience stuff as empty nesters. But it's been an interesting ride, for sure.
Yeah, man. And the same with us. We'll be 44, which is super young.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking forward, to those days in the future, because where we are right now is it's all about the kids, like get them here, get them there, get them here, get them there, and all these things. And so it's been difficult for us trying to grow in that, because we haven't had that time where it's just us. And it's difficult, man. It's hard because you put each other on the back burner, right? And then you immediately start focusing on the kids. And unfortunately, what I suck at is, dating my wife currently, and that those are things that I need to do and things that we should do. Because let's be honest with you, if you don't, you forget how to do it. Um, and that's not the way we should live. That's not the things we should do. And so it is, man, kids get in the way. And I think too, just kind of going back, um, if you if you could tell teenagers, um, I, I couldn't imagine. My heart goes out to those who, have kids at teenage years, and I don't know how they do it, because man, it's difficult having kids at 20 and 30. Um, Immediately it changes the entire dynamic of dating and relationships. Um, so yeah, I'll be 44. We're gonna get up out of Arkansas for a little while. We're gonna go do something. I know that's so. Find me in the Bahamas. My kids will graduate. We're gonna be gone.
I'm glad you mentioned the whole dating while you're married thing, because I think that's another huge piece of this conversation. Us guys definitely struggle with it, and I think Eric and Travis have both kind of talked about it on another episode. They're a little bit older than us. They're the old wily vets of the MOV podcast group, but they have both talked about how dating doesn't have to be some extravagant, expensive thing. It doesn't have to be running off to some big fancy vacation destination or spending a bunch of money on some concert tickets. It can be having some quiet time with your bride on the porch and have some conversations. It can be going for a walk at the park together. It can be grabbing a blanket and going and sitting down somewhere and just having some conversations. It doesn't have to be this extravagant type of thing. It can be a very simple, hey, I set aside this time for us. And that's what matters. And I think that's where I struggle too sometimes, thinking that dating has to be me picking her up and we're going out somewhere to dinner, a movie, or shopping or whatever. Well, it could be just some time sitting me and her and cutting on a movie and just spending that quality time together, and especially with the ladies in our life. But kind of bringing this whole thing back around when we're talking about what it is to be a man of valor in dating world. I think the job that us men who are married have, if we want to truly be a man of valor in this world, is to make sure that those around us that we have an influence with are understanding this side of things, that we're taking the advice and the wisdom that we've gained, whether it's just a little bit or it's a whole lot, and sharing it. We're not keeping it to ourselves. We're not making it this super secret type thing. That we're open and vulnerable. Like I have a 14-year-old, but I also have his friends at our church that I have an influence with, that I get to chat with, have conversations. I'm not a youth leader at our church, but I have those relationships, and I should be sharing that advice. I should be telling them, hey, this is experiences that I had. This is the struggles that I had. Here's how I messed up. Y'all don't do the same. Whether they listen or not is up to them completely. But I'm not being a man of valor in that area if I'm not sharing that information with that next generation, if I'm not encouraging them. And it doesn't have to be a 14, 15, 16-year-old. It could be the 24-year-old at the church who's a single guy who is in the dating world out there. Having a conversation with him, have a cup of coffee and talk about it. Talk about the tense, talk about how you messed up. Have those conversations, because if I would have had those, if I'd had a guy, my dad, somebody come around me at 14, 15 and have those conversations, it probably changes a lot of the mistakes that I made. If I'd had somebody heartfelt come and give me advice, not the old throw the box of condoms at you, like you mentioned, and don't get her pregnant. That's not doing anything. That didn't change anything about how you dated or your pursuit of women. It actually probably deterred the good intentions very quickly, because it was basically saying go out and be wild, just be careful when you do it. And that was a lot of the conversations that I had. So we got to be men of valor in that area if we want to really kind of transform this dating world, at least within the church and the people we have an influence with.
Yeah, and that means we have to own it, and we have to discuss topics that are hard to discuss, especially with our children and the younger generation. And man, what's hard is we have to be willing to be, like you said, vulnerable and transparent. But man, imagine if we were vulnerable enough, transparent enough that our children could be prevented from making the same mistakes that we made, because they could learn from our experience. Now, granted, most kids are just going to be morons and do whatever, but if we can offer them a little bit of guidance and maybe help them through our experiences, but we have to come down off that pedestal that we put ourselves on, especially with our children. Is we don't want our children to think that we've done terrible things or that we're bad people or whatever. But they're going to respect us more and learn from us more if we're willing to own it, and help them kind of navigate those same things. I wish that I would have had somebody speaking very bold truth into my life at that age. I had a great youth minister, and again, unfortunately, he could only offer suggestion and advice. He could not offer instruction or discipline. I wish he could have. I wish I would have had somebody come and wring my neck and say, "Hey, quit being an idiot." And sometimes that's needed. Sometimes that's needed for grown men.
Absolutely.
Sometimes sometimes grown men need that conversation and need to be told that, especially when it comes to relationships.
Yeah. And as we get kind of towards the end here, there is a verse that I want to bring about, and God speaks right to all this. This is 2 Corinthians 6:14. Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? This idea of being unequally yoked, I've seen play out in our church several times. We've had a few different couples over the years who one spouse is very devout and involved, and the other has no interest in coming to church at all. And I have seen the stress and the turmoil that causes. It is a constant argument. It is because when like in my household, there's no debate on whether or not we go to church on Sunday. It's Sunday, we're going to church. Like that, there's no conversation about that at all. Well, if the husband and wife disagree on that, if one is saying yes, we're going to church, the other saying no, we're going to the baseball game, we're going to the basketball game, we're going fishing, we're going to do this, doing that. Can you imagine the confusion that would create in the children? I'm sure if it was an option for my son to go play baseball or basketball or go fishing on Sunday versus go to church, he's probably picking those activities. And so if Jessica was saying, "Hey, let's go to the basketball game," and I'm saying, "No, we're going to church," he's leaning towards "Hey, let's go play basketball. Let's go play baseball." And so beyond just the frustrations that creates within the relationship between husband and wife, or boyfriend girlfriend, it even creates confusion to those around and causes a divide there as well. And so you've got to make sure you're not unequally yoked. You've got to make sure that your pursuits are not identical, right? Because we each have our own path. We have our own passions. We have our own desires, even within ministry type stuff. There's things that, my bride absolutely loves being a youth volunteer at our church. She's involved in the youth ministry. That's not my thing. I love to pick on the kids and have fun and do that kind of stuff here and there, but youth ministry is not something I'm called into. I might fight some of these teenage kids these days, the attitudes they've got and stuff. I've not had that temperament to constantly be with youth. And I'm not saying
I don't either.
It's even tougher these days, I think, than it has ever been. But when you're equally yoked, though, from a spiritual standpoint, at least church becomes a priority. Your pursuit of God becomes a priority. And so even though that may look a little bit different for each of you, it's the center point of how everything situates. One more verse that I want to give. This one doesn't speak directly to dating, but I think it's very applicable here. And it's again the First Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33. Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. That kind of goes back to the unequally yoked thing. When you are dating somebody and you're a Christian and they're not, your moral compass is completely different. Your standard for how you want to live is completely different. And I promise you, if you allow that person into a relationship with you who has completely different morals, who has completely different values, and you give them the key to the emotional side, right? As Randall was talking about at the beginning of this episode, they're going to mess up your morals. your moral compass is going to adjust closer to theirs than it is going to stay in your pursuit of God. And I've seen it play out way too many times. So that's all I've got today, Randall. Is any last thoughts or ideas you want to toss out here to guys before we wrap up this episode?
Yeah, man. I mean, just what you just said. There are stories of where, believer and non-believer come together and the believer is able to lead non-believer to Jesus. Those are great stories. Like, I mean, that's probably similar to your story, but those stories are few and far between. You're right. If we get around people who have, a lower moral expectation than we do, a lot of times we succumb to the sin instead of succumbing to, or becoming more holy. And that's the thing with like teenagers and even men, like, don't put yourself around someone who is living a life of sin and expect to change that. Like, you need to be on guard, because as hard as you're trying to change them for the gospel, the enemy is trying to change you for sin. And men are weak, and they can say how strong they are no matter what. But the same way men are weak, women are weak. And, all it takes is a guy to say the right words, and next thing you know, you've compromised your values. Same thing with a guy. All it takes is one line to be crossed, and next thing you know, you lose all sense of thought and control, and then you've gone into no man's land where you can't go back, right? And so just that mindset of, don't go into a relationship thinking I'm going to change this person. Go into the mindset that if I love Jesus, I'm not going to let this person change me. And I mean, honestly, my advice would also be, don't go into that relationship, right? That's one thing that Lauren and I have never disagreed on, is Jesus. Like, we've probably have disagreed on every other thing in the history of things, but when it comes to Jesus, there's no disagreement. Like, right. I don't have to like worry that my wife is just gonna quit going to church, or I don't have to worry that my wife is going to give my kids some weird crazy doctrine or thought or whatever. And I tell you, I mean, I should be completely honest, when I first saw my wife, my thoughts were not, man, that girl's a Christian. My thoughts were, dang, she's fine. Like, and so, very worldly thoughts. And just by the grace of God, she's a believer and grew up in a household that placed faith as a priority. And man, that's a deal breaker for me. Like, I decided at that age that somebody who I was going to be interested in was going to have the same faith values that I have. They can work out their own salvation accordingly. We can disagree on a few things theologically, but as far as the main things, we're going to agree on that. And that's that Jesus is the Son of God, and he came to die on the cross for our sins. And the only way to get a relationship with the Father back in order is through his Son, Christ. And then we're led by the Holy Spirit. And so those things right there are things that we don't disagree with or disagree about. And I think every other issue can be worked out and can be, navigated as long as those things are intact. Man, I'll just be honest, like, I feel like I have a good marriage, but I feel like it's not a great marriage. There are things that I need to work on, things we need to work on to get to where we want to go. And there have been times, and I'll just say, I mean, there have been times that without the foundation of Jesus, I don't know. Like,
yeah,
I'm a very selfish person, and without that foundation of Jesus, and without her, hanging in there and me hanging in there, whatever, because we know that this is what God has created for us. It's man, you don't want to get into the what ifs, but there is that kind of thought of, man, Christ is the one keeping this together, because if it was on me, thing would have fell apart a long time ago.
Yeah, I get that.
So, man, and I think the last thing is, and this is weird advice coming from me, but I would say don't rush. Just don't rush. Which is so funny because I mean, I met Lauren in November. I saw her in December, and then started dating in March, and then we were married the following December, and then 2 Februarys later we had Caleb. And so yeah, I I would say don't rush, but then I would also say if you did and you find yourself, kind of lost in the relationship that you're in, you know, hang in there and put Jesus first, and you know, grow up, show yourself some grace, but quit making the same mistakes you've made. And this is very, very difficult for me to say, just because that's me.
Right.
I have to learn from these things and make better choices in the future. And man, serve selflessly, which is difficult because I'm a very selfish person and men are selfish. And then everything else is going to work itself out, man. It really is. If we approach dating and relationships and even marriage with a heart of service, we don't have time for sin because we're too busy serving. Yeah. So I think that's it, man. I think just don't rush, and then also, that selflessness, and don't go into a relationship thinking you're going to change somebody. And the last thing is, Jordan, there are people that are biblically disqualified from being your spouse. Like, and call me judgmental if you want, but if you have a set of standards and they don't meet those standards, they are disqualified. Don't give them a chance. Like, don't entertain it. Don't compromise your own values because you're, forced to, peer pressured into doing so, or because you think, oh, well, it'll just get better, because it won't. It won't.
Well, guys, as we're wrapping up this episode, I hope you've gotten something out of this episode that is beneficial to you. Randall and I both, admittedly, are far from experts at this and have messed up more times than we care to admit, although we did admit a few times on here. I'm sure there was quite a few that we held back and didn't confess to. Dating is an important part of your Christian walk. Finding that person that God designed to be by your side is important. So take it seriously, get everything aligned correctly, and love God with your relationship. Bring him glory, shine a light for the kingdom through the way you date and through the way you have that relationship. So as we're wrapping up, we do have a free pastor registration to give away. We've had a number of guys register. We've already given away 3 registrations. I'm assuming, Randall, you don't have the registration pulled up, so I went ahead and pulled it up over on my side. I'm just going to pick a number here, and we will give away this registration, and then we'll go over a few announcements, and that will be the end of episode 4 of this season 2. So I'm going to go ahead and generate this number. Number 2, we have Paul Thomas, pastor, put on here by Matt Shearer. He's one of our Team Georgia guys down in South Georgia. So Matt, if you're listening, it will be your job to communicate to Mr. Paul Thomas that he has won that free registration to MOV 2024. He will still be responsible for his room and meal plan, that kind of thing. But as far as his registration, his fees for us, that is completely covered. Excited these free registrations were donated to the ministry, and we're able to give them away to some pastors. I know it's pretty exciting for us, and hopefully, Paul Thomas, you can bring some guys with you and come and check out MOV 2024. And I already know with the speaker lineup that we're going to get to reveal at some point in time in the future, it's going to be a great conference. Other announcements we got going on, we still have the gun raffle that is taking place. That is sponsoring the free marriage conference that will take place on November 11th at Liberty Church here in Lula, Georgia. I know there are a few guys that are listening to this podcast that will be in attendance. We've got 4 guys from out of state that are bringing their brides to come hang out at our marriage conference. Pretty exciting. One of those couples is just a very, very dear couple that my bride and I are going to get to spend some time with while they're in town. So super excited about that. Pretty much all of the information, any announcements we've got going on is going to run through 2 places. One is our website, movministries.org, where you can find out just about anything that's going on at MOV. Find our podcast links. You can find YouTube links. You can find our shop, our merchandise, and then our band app. If you haven't ever joined the band app, please do. You just go to your Google Play Store or your Apple's Play Store, download the app Band, BAND, and then search for MOV Ministries, and it will pop right up, ask to join. And that is probably our prime spot for communicating ministry news and announcements, and where you really get connected to the brotherhood. Obviously, we're a little biased, but this is a special brotherhood. It is a special connection of guys that truly care about one another. I've seen a lot of guys jump into prayer for my situations going on this week, and knowing that I've got an army of men around the world that are praying and lifting up God, the prayer requests we have. It's super encouraging. Randall, any last minute things before we wrap up?
No, I think guys, just Man Up Monday is every Monday. Be paying attention to that. We got some cool things coming up. Don't want to give out too many details, but going to be releasing some stuff on Man Up Monday that I think you guys will enjoy. And just get plugged in and get registered before the end of the year. And exciting times.
All right, guys. Well, that is it for us here on this episode 4. We hope it has been a blessing to you, and we will see you all next time.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode and that you will continue to join us on this journey to make disciples of men. Be sure to check out our social media outlets as well as movministries.org for any information, and be sure to join our digital men's community.
Hey guys, we wanted to let you know that Men of Valor podcast is proud to partner and be a part of the Recovering Fundamentalist Podcast Network. You can find their podcast and many other great podcasts by going to rfpnetwork.org. We would love for you to go and check them out as well. Hey, keep fighting, win today, and as always, go light it up for the King.